These two guys have Minnesota sports flowing in their veins. Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Yeah, it was good. It just brings a pace to the game. Gets off it early, makes all the right plays, competes his butt off on defense. It's good to see him back out there. We've certainly missed him. But guys have done a great job in his absence as well. So.
You think he's talking about LeBron or Karl Anthony Towns being out, right? Aren't they going to get him back? No, just talking about one of the other most impactful players in the NBA, Jordan McLaughlin.
Did you hear, did it come through the TV last night, the reception, when he checked in to the game? When McLaughlin checked in? I mean,
no, I didn't have volume up. I had secondary screen action last night. I did not hear volume.
You would have thought that a guy who had given his career to the Timberwolves checked in. It was a very appreciative reception.
You know what? And we'll get into statements here, and I do have a J-Mac one at some point, but that tells me there are some smart Timberwolves fans to appreciate, because it's not like he's scoring 15, 20 points off the bench. There's a lot of games like last night where he'll just be out there for 6 minutes. He'll score 2 points, maybe dish a couple assists, but the team is like plus 15 in 6 minutes because he stirs the drink better than pretty much anyone else on the roster.
I also think as far as a sports town goes, and this is not a critique, it's just a fact, we embrace guys like that.
Oh, yeah.
Like scrappy, undrafted, right?
He would be Nick Punto, right?
Yes.
As a twin. He just works his ass off. He's good. He's not great. But I think that we have a very blue collar appreciation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I do have a Jordan McLaughlin statement, but we have to let's do statement number 1 here on this Monday. Mackey and Judd. It's moving week. Old Macadac is coming back to Minneapolis to, I don't know, drink a bunch of Surly's with you guys and take in the atmosphere at Target Center when Jordan McLaughlin checks into games more often. So, statement number 1 for you guys. The national media disrespect of the Minnesota Timberwolves has always been high and warranted. It has jumped the shark at this point. Okay, in the last week, we've had Ryan Russillo on his podcast do a full, he did 2 things. He called D'Angelo Russell the worst player in the NBA who plays regularly, which, again, this has not been a pro D'Lo show at all whatsoever, but he's also playing some of the best basketball of his life the last 2 or 3 months. So just kind of weird timing, as the Wolves have, I think, the second best record in the league since the beginning of January. And D'Lo he's had 1 clunker essentially in that stretch. He's shooting 46% from 3. It's just kind of a weird time to drop that take. It's almost like you haven't been watching any Timberwolves basketball over the last 5 or 6 weeks. We also had Ryan Russillo on his podcast do the Anthony Edwards is going to demand a trade soon, so start to figure out what your plans are because this thing's a train wreck around him take. We had Worldwide Wob on Twitter, Rob Perez. He took a screenshot of this from the ESPN. Was it the Warriors Clippers? Who are they playing? Warriors Nuggets from the other night. Games missed by stars this season. Kawhi Leonard, 25. Devin Booker, 25. Anthony Davis, 24. Zion Williams. They're trying to show you, look how many games stars are missing this year. Zion, 21. Paul George, 16. Steph, 15. Durant, Embiid, Lillard, 12. Karl Anthony Towns has missed more than all of those guys, and he was an all-pro player last year. Wasn't he second-team All-NBA or something last year? Yeah. Third team, whatever it was?
Third team, I think.
Again, I'm not saying he belongs in the same sentence as Steph Curry necessarily or Kawhi Leonard for his career, but to not even make the list, he'd be atop the list. And he was an All-NBA player. And we've been highly critical of him, but that's absurd. We also had Bill Simmons put out his trade value rankings on The Ringer, and Rudy Gobert led the buyer's remorse category, even though the Timberwolves defense, in large part because of Rudy Gobert, is one of the top 8 defenses in the NBA. And if you just take their net rating when he's on the court, the Wolves would have one of the 2 best defenses in the entire league when he's on the court. So I'm not saying that we need to celebrate the Timberwolves. They've done nothing really in 35 years of substance other than one trip to the Western Conference Finals. But they've been one of the best teams in the NBA for the last 5 weeks. They're within striking distance of the 3 and the 4 seed in the Western Conference. So let's just pump the brakes on clowning the Timberwolves and let this thing continue to play out for a couple months before we come with these scorching takes. National media.
I think if you take each one of those things as a separate entity, though, and break them down, it's simpler, because I think the perception league-wide and even internally on D'Lo with the Wolves is basically, yeah, no, thank you. Like he's played well. He definitely off the ball has shot lights out at times. But I also think that there's this feeling about him of, you know what, he does a lot of things for himself, and he is I think he's built up enough ill will that one makes more sense. The Ant thing,
but
think,
to say that he's the worst player that
I know,
plays
but
regular, that is filled with Timberwolves hatred and vitriol. That goes beyond a D'Lo take.
It's the perfect storm, though. It's Timberwolves hatred and vitriol combined with D'Lo. So it's the perfect storm. It's the perfect storm.
But it's not accurate. It's hyperbolic and it's false.
But what I was going to say is the second thing on Ant, I think, is totally fictitious. Ant is, as far as I know, Ant's happy here. He's not going to demand a trade. Watch him play.
Why are we even talking about this?
Yes, exactly right. Now, Cat,
he's going to sign a max contract. It's ridiculous.
And Cat, I got because at the time before his max contract came, Cat would look miserable and he would pout, and he's pouty Cat, and then you're like, okay, I think he might want out. What has Ant done? What has Ant done in his time here up through last night to ever lead you to believe he is going to demand a trade?
No, and we always were
Nothing.
guilty of this. Minnesotans were always kind of
right.
Every Gopher coach comes along. Oh my God, we got Tubby Smith, but is he
just
going to leave us in a year?
Ben Johnson don't want out.
Yeah, well, he might actually.
You don't have to be concerned about it. He might get out, but he don't want out.
It's playing into our insecurities as flyover territory that our star players and coaches might want to leave us someday, and it only usually happens. Kevin Garnett had to be begged to be traded. He didn't want out.
Yes.
He wanted to stick it through while they ran Ricky Davis in as his sidekick.
And then Glenn ripped him.
Yeah. I'm just saying, okay, I understand why the Wolves are a laughingstock, and they have absolutely earned that pedigree, if you will, across the last 20 years for sure. But it's almost like they got off to such a bad start, right? They were 16-21 after the loss to the Pistons on New Year's Eve, and they had the big come to Jesus meeting. And it really, at that point, it felt like, ooh, Chris Finch is maybe one more loss away from getting fired. But we weren't even halfway through the season. So people saw the trade, and then people saw the first 35 games go awry. And that's just, okay, that's the end now. We can just put a bow on the Timberwolves. Now we have our Timberwolves takes. But some interesting things are emerging here, including they're fighting for the 3 and the 4 seed in the Western Conference. They just beat the Warriors on Friday night. They beat the Nuggets this season. They beat the Grizzlies this season. They're going to play the Nuggets. I guess they beat the Nuggets last night. I meant when they beat the Nuggets with a full allotment a month ago, not last night's Nuggets. And they'll get another shot here this week.
But the last thing that you pointed out with the list on games missed and Cat, that's an intriguing one, because that is, yes, it's Timberwolves criticism, but it also goes to show you how off the radar Cat gets. And that's a Cat problem too. Think about that. Because this is a league where players matter. I don't know that teams do. If you're on the Celtics, that definitely helps. Lakers, that helps. But the majority of players, it's like you don't think the Memphis Grizzlies, Ja Morant. You think Ja Morant, and he happens to play for the Grizzlies. So think about how off the radar Cat becomes. And that's the problem. That's been my complaint with Cat at times. So I find each of those to be interesting statements, not just about the Wolves, but about players. And if you these are smart people in the truck that put together these lists of, let's come up with a list of top players, and you don't even think of Cat. What does that say?
Yeah, it's
interesting.
It'll be interesting to see him because he's going to be back at some point to see how he kind of fits back into the mix here. All right. Judd?
I'd like to jump in with a hot statement here, too, off of your point. Trade deadline comes up this week, correct? NBA
3
trade
days.
deadline arrives in 3 days.
Yeah.
My statement is this. The Timberwolves should move D'Lo now.
Wow.
I would move him now, and here's why.
Were you sitting on that? Before the show started,
No.
Declan said,
No, when you
does
started
anyone
to talk
have
about
a
it,
really hot Wolves take that we can lead the episode with? And you're
I
like,
wasn't thinking about it.
load management.
I wasn't. Well, the load management thing is a whole different. That's another thing. But anyway,
You buried the lead on us.
You helped me free my mind up. My conscience.
Okay.
See, statements is great because sometimes I hear things and then I'm like, oh, you know what? That's a good point. And I wasn't really.
It's like the
thinking,
triangle offense, like
exactly,
Phil Jackson. It's
exactly
all
right.
rhythmic.
One thing to peel back the curtain just briefly that I pride myself on is this show has a great flow. And like we'll be talking about things and like we'll start a show and I'm like, is this gonna like lead to a conversation? Inevitably it does, which I love about this show.
Yeah.
So as you talked about that and D'Lo and just I think I went to, and I am a loser. Okay, I get that. I think I went to 5 of the 6 games on the homestand that was completed last night. Just in talking to people about D'Angelo Russell, because Phil, you're right. Like his statistics, off the ball shooting has been great of late, but you know what? He's a free agent. He ain't coming back. And I would term him what I feel like he is a statistical player. So like his stats are fine. I would term him to be what I consider to be a losing personality player, which is where are you going with him? And he's a free agent. So my answer is not very far.
Mm-hmm.
He's playing well enough, in my opinion, to find a team that would at least send you some draft capital. My God, you need it back.
Does Kevin Durant want out of Brooklyn? Huh?
Exactly. So,
KD?
but if I can, but I mean, I will take back a player if I can get a contract also short term. So I don't want to be saddled with this. Okay.
I'd be saddled with KD's contract. How many years are left on it?
Tim Conley. Can you imagine him being traded here?
No chance.
He'd never report.
What else would you have to give up to the Nets? Probably you'd have to.
I love
D'Lo's
this
contract.
You
can't really trade first round picks until the draft because you have to have one in back-to-back years. That's a separate episode. We'll figure out how to bring KD into this mix.
In fact, I think we should hang our hat on that for Reckless Speculation Thursday because that'd be a great Reckless Speculation episode. But anyway, Tim Conley, we know for a fact, is not in love with D'Lo. I would trade him. I would trade him and get back what I possibly could. And I honestly don't think as a team, you'd be making your team that much worse.
So you'd have to... And maybe there's been some because there's some great Wolves bloggers out there. Maybe they've done some legwork on if you were to make this trade. And I just to take a step back here, there's probably a lot of people that are watching and listening to this being like, "What? He's been playing the best basketball of his life the last 2 months. Why would you trade him when you're fighting for the top half of the Western Conference playoff bracket?" Well, from an asset management standpoint, Kyle Teige and I went over this on Flagrant Howls, our twice-a-week Wolves podcast you can find on the Score North YouTube channel, Flagrant Howls podcast, feed Mackey and Judd. If you look down the road, let's see here, 2023-24.
Notebook out. He's got a notebook out. Yes.
So I did some hand math here. So if you start to look at what's your cap situation with these 2 7-footers under contract, Anthony Edwards is going to be up for a post-rookie contract max for him. Jaden McDaniels is going to make a lot more money because he's kind of on the same timeline as Anthony Edwards, right? So in 2 years from now, so this is 2023-24, so this will be 24-25. The salary cap is projected to be $140 million. So keep that number in your head, $140 million. That's the salary cap. It's a soft cap. Luxury tax, $170. All right. Gobert, $44 million. This is in 2 years. Cat, $50 million. Ant, projected first year of that max contract, $35 million. And I put Jaden McDaniels at $20 million, but then Dane Moore, who I would trust with this salary cap stuff 100 times more than you should trust me. Dane and Kyle had a conversation that they think it's more like a 4-year, $100 million contract for Jaden McDaniels, who has become one of the best perimeter defenders and wing defenders in the NBA. So I have him at 20. Maybe it's 25, but that's 100. If you keep him at 20, that's $149 million tied up in those 4 players 2 years from now. So you're $9 million over the salary cap. You're still $20 million under the luxury tax, but you have to fill out like 9 more roster spots, right? So that doesn't count Naz Reid, who's set to become a free agent. D'Lo, who's set to become a free agent. Are you going to sign D'Lo to an extension? Okay, well, that's going to cost you at least $25, $30 million a year. Yep. That bumps you up well over the luxury tax line without any other players on your team. So you almost can't, if you want to keep Ant and you want to keep Jaden, unless you plan on trading Cat or Gobert this summer, which maybe they do. We don't know. You have to trade D'Lo or he might walk for nothing unless you think you can facilitate a sign-and trade of some kind. Maybe he needs you to facilitate a sign-and trade because the teams that he wants to go to don't have cap space. So there's just, like, imagine being Tim Connolly, and it's the bed that you made, sort of, but Karl Anthony Towns getting hurt has made it more murky. There are strategic asset management reasons to trade D'Lo for something before you let him walk for nothing. So we'll see. All right, Dex.
All right. I'm going to kind of piggyback off the D'Lo trade chatter here and say, would you do this? It's more of a question to you guys here because I saw Bobby Marks put out some trade deadline primer. I believe this was late last week, but he basically did trade deadline predictions, and he had the Wolves trading D'Angelo Russell to the Miami Heat. And we've kicked this idea around before, but it would be Russell and a 2028 second-round pick to Miami for Kyle Lowry and Dwayne Dedmon. And Dedmon's just like a slappy center that comes off the bench for Miami. He plays 10 to 12 minutes a game, so a little backcourt depth there. But his thing with Lowry is, even though he is up there in age, injuries have deteriorated his play. Do you trust Kyle Lowry more in the playoffs than you do with D'Angelo Russell? And if you're going to lose that salary and you're going to pay one of those two $29 million, I wouldn't be completely in on this trade. Like, I don't think it, like, all of a sudden I look at this and say, oh, here we go. This is exactly what the Wolves need. This is the last piece here. But it is an intriguing piece because I don't know what else you can really get for D'Angelo Russell, too.
I don't like this. Doogie keeps bringing this up, too. Like, a lot of people are just connecting dots here that, oh, the D'Lo could go to Miami and then Kyle Lowry could go back to Minnesota. Well, Lowry has $29 million on the books for next year, too. So you would get... And he's declining. So Kyle Lowry used to be one of the best guards in the NBA. He's 36 years old. He's shooting 39% from the field.
Oh.
He's shooting close to an all-time low three-point percentage, too, 33% from three. And I just don't know that you'd, like, if it was just a swap of expiring contracts or something, I could maybe be talked into it, but I'd rather just ride D'Lo's contract out. The thing, though, with D'Lo's contract is you can't just let it come off the books and gain $30 million in cap space because you're already over the cap. So that's part of the issue here. I guess somebody smarter than me would have to tell me, is there a basketball reason to swap D'Lo for a 36-year-old Kyle Lowry? This seems like Heat wishful thinking to me, but
yeah,
I don't know. I'll tell you what, regardless of who their starting point guard is, I can tell you that their backup point guard, who came back after a 30-game absence last night, here's my statement. I can't think of a player in Timberwolves history that makes more of an impact while seemingly doing less in a box score. So Jordan McLaughlin, for his career, and his career numbers are pretty much the same as this season, so we'll just go this season so far. He averages 4 points a game. He dishes 3.5 assists. He can't shoot, and he's not very tall. He wasn't drafted. He's just he was an Iowa Wolf for a little while. You think, okay, you look at the guy's box score, he'll go and get you like 3 or 4 points and a couple assists. This season, when Jordan McLaughlin is on the court versus off the court, per 100 possessions, the Timberwolves are 17 points better. 17 points better. I believe that's the best gap by a margin of any player on the roster when he is on the court versus off the court. Not because he's splashing threes or getting to the rack or, going through scoring bursts. He just puts guys in situations to get theirs, like Jalen Noel, Anthony Edwards. And I'm glad that the Wolves fans see it and appreciate it because for whatever reason, he is just incredible at opening things up offensively, being where he's supposed to be, and stirring the drink the way it's supposed to be stirred.
He's incredibly smart. And I think the important thing, too, is in a league where a lot of players care about their number one concern, getting theirs, he doesn't. He's just a really smart player who knows how to facilitate. He knows how to make plays. He knows where to be, but he's never really concerned about himself. And like you look at the majority of guys, they are. And I get it. That's how you get paid. And this all comes back to the fact that this is a league that recognizes players more than teams. But I think Jordan's just a really savvy, smart, future coach type of guy who, if you're Chris Finch, you probably absolutely love because he's doing what you need, not what he needs.
Yeah. He, by the way, too, makes $2.1 million this year, and he's under contract next year for $2.3 million. So that's about as low of a salary as you can have in the National Basketball Association. So, and they need guys like that. They need like cheap team control players that they can kind of fill out the roster while they're top heavy and eventually even more top heavy with Anthony Edwards. So, yeah. All right. Any other Wolves fodder here, Judd?
Yeah. Here's my statement. That was a load of crap. So I didn't pay to go to last night's game. I sat on press row. All I pay for is parking. So I saw the media meal look pretty good. I saw the menu last night. $20. I'm not
$20
paying for
now.
They charged $20 starting a year ago. They charged $20 for their meal. I don't ever.
I feel like it was like $9 when old Mackey left. The
Wild's $13, and I thought that was high, but that's a bargain. The Timberwolves, no, it looks fine. I stay home and eat my own food, and then I go. Anyway, I go last night, and I sit down to watch the Nuggets. Coming off a win against the Hawks on Saturday, I want to see the number one team in the Western Conference go against the Wolves, who have been improving, and this was going to be a good test, and a 6-game homestand with a good test. Of course, dumb me didn't think about the fact that Denver had played, as I said, the night before. And so Denver, on the back end of a back-to-back, sits Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Aaron Gordon, Jokic, and Jamal Murray. If those guys sound important, they're 4 of the 5 starters. The only guy that was forced to play was Michael Porter Jr.
Yeah.
He's the only.
Bones Highland can't get on the court.
Bones Highland didn't get off the bench. They sat him as well, and that was Doogie's guy. So I'm there literally as the Bones Highland scout because Doogie keeps saying Tim Connolly loves him. I didn't see him. The Nuggets elect to go completely non-competitive, and all I could think about was there was some poor guy sitting down basically in front of me, courtside seats, right? So this guy, I'm guessing he paid, but somebody paid. This guy is in a Nikola Jokic jersey. Okay. So he's courtside, clearly looking forward to seeing the Joker play. And instead he sees these G League schleps. God bless them. I'm sure their parents love them and that's awesome. But instead he sees these guys playing. The Timberwolves win. And I know Wolves fans are pleased and that's great. But I guess I got a question. What's the point? What's the point? Let's either lessen the games played. If this is going to be, if you're back-to-backs, we are not playing guys.
So teams have basically decided we're not gonna play stars on back-to-backs very often. Yeah. Which is even more reason why Anthony Edwards should be an all-star.
Yes,
because he doesn't miss games and he's putting up these numbers. He might get in with the Steph Curry injury here too, but
huge praise to him though.
It has become old school to just play in games now, apparently.
Yes. Yes. But, what did we – I guess here's my question from a non-bitching fan point of view. Here's my question. What did we even learn last night? That the Timberwolves can stomp out a team that is essentially – to use a baseball –
Actually, yes. Quite frankly, that hasn't happened really at all this season.
Well, right. No, they lose. They ordinarily lose because I gave this some thought. They ordinarily lose to NBA teams that aren't considered that good. The Nuggets did not put an NBA team on the floor. That was a lot of G League backup.
The Wolves needed that actually. The Wolves have.
You know who didn't? The fans and me.
But it was still fun to watch the Wolves run around and beat somebody up.
Kick some ass.
You're not that.
I understand I agree with your premise. The NBA sustainably has to have stars playing in games and generate ticket revenue and like when they sit for these nationally televised
Plus, I want my
games,
players
Timberwolves,
tested.
They've
I want
been
my players
tested
tested
this season. Like
I want my players tested at every
they're
opportunity.
going to play the same Nuggets team with all those players tomorrow night, so you'll get to see it. It's not about being tested. I agree with your first point, which is the guy that bought a ticket.
Wait, so you don't care if your team, so you're playing the best team in the Western Conference on back-to-back, and you get a minor league team.
Judd, they've already beat the best version of the Nuggets once, and they're going to play them
I
again
want to see them
tomorrow.
play them every time. I want to see them play. They're making up injuries that don't exist for guys to not play.
I'm not going to die on this hill because I agree with your general premise that the NBA has a load management problem. It's splitting hairs for us to argue about whether they needed the test last night or their season is meaningless.
I didn't say it's meaningless. I'm saying 4 of 5 starters is ridiculous. A couple of guys, maybe. 4 of 5 starters didn't play.
Well, what's funny is so the Warriors had the same sort of conundrum where they had a back-to-back Minnesota and then Denver last week, and they decided, okay, we're gonna pick one of these games to go full throttle to win, and we're going to sit. And they decided we're going to play our starters against the Wolves because that's the low-hanging fruit. And the Wolves slapped them upside the head and beat them. And then they had to sacrifice. They lost back-to-back games because load management, right?
This is a walking advertisement to reduce the amount of regular season games. That's what this is, which I would
Can we just do 70? We don't need back-to-backs. Can we just do...
No, you don't.
Just every other night. Sometimes you get a couple nights off, but you basically play every other night for 6 months or something.
Yes, let's
with
get
an
it.
all-star breaks.
They'll never do it because of greed, but yes, this is to me, 70. Awesome.
But I think they'd have to do the ticket math. But if the Stars are only going to play 65 or 70 games anyways, could you go to the Players Association and say, look, what if we just made the season 70 games? Would you guys play? No back-to-backs. 70-game season, no back-to-backs. Would you guys play? And unfortunately, there's going to be teams that still figure, well, it's a 5-game road trip, and even though we're not playing back-to-backs, we want the rest advantage by sitting our guys into those games. I think there's always going to be a load management situation when you're playing over the course of 6 months. But anyhow, speaking of load management, why don't you bring a load of people to Park Tavern? A load of people. How creative can you get with your group gatherings at Park Tavern? That's the question for the audience, Judd.
And by a load of people, as you see the bowling there that takes place at the official sports bar of Sports Dad, Park Tavern in St. Louis Park. We're not talking 10 or 15. That's a small, cute little group. We're talking 40, 50 people. We're talking parties, anniversaries, birthdays, and it's this simple. All you have to do is contact them. They will do all of the work. Parktavern.net, 952-929-6810. Plus, Sports Dad plans to be there on Sunday for the big game. So come by and say hi. I'm sure I will be sipping on some Surly's, enjoying football. 2 bars there. I will be in the front bar. Park Tavern, St. Louis Park is the place for lots of fun, great food, great drink, good sports, and group gatherings.
I mean, you can say that you'll be there for the bowl. The bowl.
I can say the bowl. I just find it hilarious that it's called the big game. I just love the big game. I think that's hilarious.
I was watching Around the Horn late last week, and I can't remember which panelist, but whoever won took their 30 seconds of FaceTime at the end and said, the Super Bowl is a dumb name. It's always been a dumb name. The big game would be a better name for the actual Super Bowl.
Wow.
They should change it to the big game.
You know where it came from? The backstory was the late Lamar Hunt, who owned the Chiefs, and his kid still does. But
Super Bowl.
Yeah, his kid was playing with a Super Bowl, and they were trying to think of names for the NFL AFL clash. And he saw the Super Bowl, and he thought, that's a good idea. Let's call it the Super Bowl. And that's where it came from.
Amazing.
It's a dumb name. That's a good hot take. I'm not sure I don't really agree with it, but it's a great hot take.
I think it caught Tony Reale off guard. He was like, whoa, where's this coming from? He planted the seed early in the show he said something like, just in passing, he's like, by the way, it's a dumb name. And then they were all like, what? What do you mean?
Who was it? Do you recall?
I think it was Pablo Torre, actually.
Oh, yeah, Pablo's good.
Just unleashing the takes.